morning and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 256th take, live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star Studios of Azle, Texas. I'm your host, Barry Duplessis, as always, and I'm so proud, so pleased, and so privileged to be with you all tonight. It's going to be a fantastic show. Yes, we might be exhausted. We might have coffee. The PCA trade show might have concluded just a few days ago, but we're here, we're alive, we're awake, at least for first few minutes. Before we get to introductions of our esteemed guest of honor tonight, I do have to thank the people that make this show possible. That, of course, is our sponsors. Tonight's show is sponsored by Drew Estate. Last month on their Freestyle Live, Drew Estate announced and unveiled the latest Freestyle Live pack to be none other than the all-new Liga Privada H99 Connecticut Corojo Papas Fritas. Yes, and the most obvious look yet. Everyone knew it was going to be a Papas Fritas, but not everyone knew it was an H99, unless you have an incredible palate like myself and my guest tonight. But the Liga and the Privada H99 Connecticut Corojo Papas Fritas is now available at Drew Diplomat retailers. So check out your local Drew Diplomat retailer today to check out the all-new Liga Privada H99 Connecticut Corojo Papas Fritas today. And welcome, everybody. This is our 256th take. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome in our guest tonight, sponsored by United Cigars. Smoke one today and start living united. Mr. Michael Herklots of Ferio Tego. Michael, how you doing tonight?
Was there no applause track or something that's supposed to come on after that?
I really need to bring one in.
What a buzzkill.
Yeah.
I mean, I can just imagine everyone was on the edge of their seats and just went, oh.
I've actually scared people with my video introductions. Or startled. I don't know if scared is the correct word, but definitely startled. Poor Charlie Minato. I think I feel bad for not preparing him for that, because he was not prepared, and he was he was very startled.
Go business, bro.
Yeah. My favorite though, who he's known as a very stoic figure. I know he's got a great sense of humor, and those people who know him really love him. Jorge Padron, the opportunity I got to interview him at the PCA trade show a couple years ago, you've been on my video several times, so did the thing, and he's like, whoa, and he made this joke. He's like, man, I was about to shit my pants. He was laughing. It was a really good time. I was like, I made Jorge Padron laugh. That's my claim to fame. So I'll take it.
That's great. That's great. What's happening, man? You make it back safe?
I did. Yeah. Unfortunately, unlike my colleague Ben Lee, who got the curse of Zev put on him. He saw Zev at the airport, and then that just ruined his day. One of his bags went to DFW, one of his bags went to North Carolina, and he got stuck in Las Vegas for an extra 12 hours. And then,
which is I would rather be stuck anywhere on planet Earth other than another 6 hours in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it was rough.
I mean, really, that hope that you feel when you know you're headed home and you're leaving the desert, when you get stuck for even another hour delay, it brings me to tears.
Yeah, it was I felt so bad for him, and it was just tragically following along. I got up the next morning, I got home, picked up my kids like I was telling you, came up to the evening routine, put them to bed, and I passed the fuck out too. I was exhausted. I get up, and my poor colleague Ben's posted on Facebook okay, made it to this place. He hadn't even gotten his connecting flight yet. They had to move another flight and stuff. I was like, Jesus, man. Poor guy. Yeah, really poor guy. It was awful. It was just awful and stuff. But no, man, Vegas was fun, man. I know we're going to talk a little bit about it. But kind of wanted to just kind of talk about a couple things. I want to bring this up now, because a couple of us were talking about the food this year in Vegas, and there was this unfortunately, I think there was a little bit more of everyone kind of went with the cocktail hour approach, which has kind of been your thing for years. So I think they stole a play out of the Herklots playbook. And instead of dinners and stuff like that. And so we were talking about who had the best food, and I was like, and you're gonna love this. Aaron Loomis, who hates everything, said that him and I agreed that your cocktail hour had the best food that we had all week long.
I love it. I agree. I mean, first of all, I think Delmonico's does an exceptional job. I mean, I was in Vegas for 6 nights, and I think I ate there 3 of them. And I just think I find so much inspiration in that restaurant. It's just awesome. So great. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I'm sorry the food sucked elsewhere, but things happen.
And it didn't suck. It was just like I like,
No, of course.
you know, like, man, hey man, I mean it's not like I went starving or anything like that. But I will say that I did go to, oh God, where were we? It really doesn't matter. Not at Delmonico is the point. And we were at a cocktail hour, and there was a shrimp skewer, and I ate it, and someone else ate like half of one, and I was like, "Yep, that's not cooked at all."
Oh no.
And so I was like, "All right, well that's enough of that." So I'm gonna go. I was like,
Oh,
I went
gross.
straight to the bar. I was like, "Can I have some tequila? Because I gotta burn that out."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's awful. There's nothing worse than being in a public spot like that around people and you put a bite in that you know is bad.
Yeah.
Could be chicken, could be shrimp, could be an oyster, whatever it is, and you just, that's one of those few moments where I really have no shame and I will spit it out immediately regardless of decorum, because it's just not worth what's going to happen to
Oh
you
yeah,
later.
it's not worth the penalty. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was unbelievable. I was like, oh shit, that's a problem. So but all good. So um I have to say, like, okay, so going back, I mean, did you pick the menu out, or because I know you and Emerald and the manager Joe Monaco's are all like go way back, and this has been a long
Yeah.
standing partnership. Like, do they pick the menu for you? Do you pick it?
This year, we worked together on the menu, but we really didn't change much from last year, to be honest with you. I mean, last year was just so good that, I think there was one thing that we added this year that we didn't have last year.
The blue cheese stuffed dates, because that was
Yeah,
fucking off
that's
the
it.
chain.
That's
Holy
it.
shit, they were good.
Yeah, bonkers. But like, you know, the chicken and waffle, I mean, that's if you don't eat one of those, it's really like going to Vegas and not walking the strip. I mean,
Hmm.
you don't go to Delmonico's and not taste this chicken and waffle. Nor can you leave without tasting the banana cream pie. Although we didn't have dinner that night, so but we generally menu was consistent. They did an amazing job. The wine bar that we set up, Dylan picks, and it's generally features wines who support the Emerald Lagasse Foundation, as Ferio Tego does. So there's a lot of kind of inside baseball when you look at that relationship, and there's just so much reciprocity of support. We're very fortunate to have that relationship.
That's such a good feeling too. Like that, when things kind of go first the full circle like that. I'm a sucker for stories like that, because it's just like, I think that really goes to show, like, truly, like, what our industry is all about. Like, the cigar industry is very much about helping people out, I think, and it's just about relationships and stuff like that. So it's just really
The entirety
cool.
of the Ferio Tego story is a full circle story. I mean, in so many ways, whether it's factory relationships, distribution partnerships, retail partnerships. I mean, when you look at just how everything has evolved and where we are today in this moment, there are so many loops that have been completed and are now kind of headed around for another time around. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I the more time I spend with you, Michael, the more I appreciate, again, that aspect about this industry. Like, it's all about relationships and stuff, just because you've been able to build like such a network of, of, yes, of course, friends, but just a this almost a charitable is not the right word, because it's not like you guys are, all of you guys are running charities and stuff like that, but it's a very charitable network, if that makes sense. I think
I
that makes
think,
sense. I think that's what I'm trying to
yeah,
say.
whether it's within industry or external, if you look at the relationships that I'm fortunate to have kind of forged and jumped in along the way, um, they all tend to be people who genuinely are rooting for the success of others. And I think that kind of proactive generosity of just goodwill, not necessarily, not financial uh, fundraising, but spiritual fundraising, rooting for people and supporting those who help you along the way. That sort of generosity cycle is, I feel like it's just as much work. You could build your company any number of ways. I've just been fortunate to do it this way, and it's working.
Yeah, I it's beautiful. So we're gonna get a little bit into that here in just a second. So why don't we? It looks like you've already lit up. So I'm gonna go ahead. I normally
My
ask my
first
guests to
cigar since
choose.
Vegas.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh man. No, because I did not do that because of a little saying that you coined earlier this week that I'm going to repeat or later on. But this is not my this is not my first cigar since Vegas, but I'm excited. Normally, I ask my guests to choose, but I'm going to go ahead and go with the Ferio Tego Sumo.
I did the
So
same.
um, the torpedo size, and you have it. There's 4 Vitolas, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Correct.
So we got there's the Corona Gorda.
Corona Gorda, Robusto, Torpedo, and Gordo 6x60.
Just for
And
coup.
I'm joining you with the Torpedo.
Nice. Did you what kind of cut did you put on it?
Straight.
Straight. Yeah, I do mine at a slight angle just to create a little more surface area.
Smart.
I really love the smell on the foot with this cigar.
Coop said you were into smelling feet.
Yeah, I'm into smelling all kinds of things. So
Listen, I'm a big believer in smell it, dry smoke it, touch it, and then light it. But there's so much to learn before you actually smoke it. There's so much to appreciate. There's so much to pay attention to. You know, um, I really appreciate when people take a couple extra minutes to pay attention to all the work, not just like the last bit, which is the flavor.
yeah, the aroma. I'm toasting the foot a little bit. I'm letting the aroma kind of kick in a little bit. That's kind of unique. That's got some uniqueness to it as well. I'm digging
There,
that.
it's very difficult to innovate and create and really develop unique new flavors and experiences.
Oh yeah,
And because at the end of the day, they're all a bunch of rolled up brown leaves. I mean, let's face it, there's only so much you can do. But I I really spend a lot of time finding areas where you can create unique. And for me, that's really in aroma and mouthfeel and texture, and then how they relate to flavor and strength and body. And so I always appreciate hearing your reviews and your notes, because I think you really kind of thoughtfully look for um, the work outside of just flavor. So aroma is super important, and for me, the body and texture that this develops from the first puff, I think is very compelling and invites you to continue on.
the early reviews that I've heard from this, because it was put on the market a little bit before the trade show and everything. I hadn't had it. This is my first one. And the early reviews that I got from people too were and forgive me, Michael, they weren't fanboys of yours or anything, but they were like, oh, that's good, it's good. So I was like, oh well, that's great, fantastic.
It was fanboys. I don't know if we're at fanboy level yet. Hopefully not. But being in the booth, and we were very busy the whole show, so it was hard for me to interact with everybody. But we were trying to get everyone to enjoy the cigar, and it was really great, whether people came up to me directly or even just overhearing a comment here or there. But it was typically within the first inch or so of someone firing up, where they would stop, take a look at it, and just go, "This is really good." That's the best review you could possibly get.
I have to imagine, and I've had this conversation several, I guess, over I would say easily over 200 times considering how many shows I've done. But it still never gets old hearing about that experience though, from someone who's actually created something that I'm smoking or someone else has smoked. And you to be able to see that reaction. Had a very candid conversation. Two of my favorite interviews on this show, I get asked that question all the time, were my first interview with Alan Rubin, my second interview with Alan Rubin, because it was captured two periods of time. The second one was just a couple weeks before the sale to STG.
Yeah.
And we kind of took a stroll down memory lane, and he talked about how the first time he saw his cigars on a shelf and he saw a customer buy it and smoke it, and what that experience was like to him. And it was really cool to see him go down this nostalgic path and kind of remember what that was like. And I have to imagine, like, I have never created something like this, like you have, like he has, and others and stuff. And it's got to be this just unbelievable feeling of like surreal nature and just pride and nervousness. It's just got to be a mix of
when you
emotion.
see it in the wild, it's a tough thing to explain. When you just see someone enjoying your stuff. I mean, now it's also easier to see, because of social media and other stuff. So if even just looking through feeds, when you see someone posting a photo of something you created in a meaningful moment in their day and bragging about it, that's the same feeling, but when I started, we didn't have those tools. And so I had a similar experience seeing someone. I was at a cigar bar in Florida, and I was there ahead of a meeting or something. So we went to this cigar bar, and the cigar bar itself was not a customer at the time. And I saw a guy walk over to his locker and take out a box of Timeless Supremes, Timeless Nicaragua at the time, and walk back to his table and put them down, open up the box, and everyone took a cigar out. And I thought for sure someone was setting me up. Like, I really thought someone had like planned this. And so I walked right over to say hello to them, and they were like, "Can I help you?" And I was like, "That's my cigar." And they're like, "No, these are my cigars." And I was like, "No, I made that cigar." And he was like, wasn't tracking at all. And so I just introduced myself and said I worked for Nat Sherman, and that was the second blend I had ever done. And it's the first time I'd ever actually seen someone not at Nat Sherman buy it and enjoy it. And it was awesome.
It's got to be such an incredible feeling. It's so exciting.
Yeah. And it sure doesn't get old, I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. We're going to dive right into that. So let's get into tonight's major point, which is always brought to you by the people. Yes, cigar people, the people who know everything about a lifetime of service, protocol, cigars, more than just pool parties and good times. Well, maybe it is. But behind the fun is a motivation for service, a motivation for giving back. From the original Protocol Blue to the latest release in the Lawman series, Phoebe Cousins' Protocol has always been about honor, passion, and yes, the people. It's what their life's work has been and always will be about. Power of the P Protocol cigars. So, Michael, as we mentioned, we've lit up the Suma, Ferio Tego Suma, the newest route.
Prior to that, if you've not had Protocol, support Protocol. I love Juan. He's such a great guy. He's so passionate. He's good for our business. I love that he supports this show. And so I want to spend another 30 seconds. His cigars are delicious. And if you do not know Protocol, you need to go find them. Okay, now that's enough about Protocol. Let's talk Suma.
Well, that's like we said, we lit that up. First couple puffs in, Michael, I got to tell you, like we were talking about those. You mentioned it right off the bat when we're like, it's kind of hard to create something really truly unique. And I won't say that I've never had these flavor notes in the first couple inches, but it's something that I don't have too often. And it grabs your attention a lot, like right off the bat, because it's interesting, it's balanced, and it gives your palate something to kind of like latch onto. So so far right off the gate, fantastic. I got to tell you though, it's got to be those extra couple of days in the UPS warehouse, right? I mean, that has to absolutely do that.
That is a confidential aging process that Ferio Tego does not cut corners. So if you really want to, put our money where our mouth is, 24 hours of hot box aging in a UPS warehouse really does wonders to even out the humidity in a very magical way.
Oh man. Uh
It's a good thing I'm so go with the flow, because boy, stuff like that doesn't stress me out at all at a trade show. You know what I mean? Not a touch. Not me.
So when were you supposed to have them? When did you end up getting them? You were supposed to have them, I'm assuming, probably Thursday
They
or
were
Friday,
supposed
and
to
you got
be
the
there
other stuff.
Friday. Yeah, they were supposed to be in the shipment. And so background, we were setting up our booth. The whole reason we were at this show was to talk about Suma, to put it in people's hands. Finally, a core line to join the Elegancia and Generoso. I was so pumped to just, I mean, I was going to carpet bomb that show floor with Suma. And as we're setting up and we're getting organized and we're kind of pumping ourselves up, and I was like, all right, tomorrow, everyone that walks in, we cut and light a Suma. And then I'm looking around, I'm like,
Where's the Suma?
where the hell are the Suma? And there was a computer glitch that back ordered the Suma and did not put them in the order. So we overnighted them from Florida, and we found it at noon Friday, Las Vegas time. So that was 3 o'clock Friday, Florida time. Thank God there was someone there that could pull them, pack them, and ship them overnight for priority Saturday morning delivery, which is an 8 a.m. delivery. And when we tracked it, it was still at the UPS station Saturday morning. And they said it just didn't make the truck. Sorry about that. We'll drop it off on Monday. Which then some profoundly unchristian things were said. Not by me, but I heard them. And I appreciated the effort. And actually, I mean, incredibly, we stopped by the business center Sunday morning and they had been dropped off. So unclear when they made it there, maybe sometime on Saturday. But either way, we had Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday with Suma. And every single cigar got cut, lit, and handed out.
Beautiful. So we decided to and in during one of those conversations where I was handed a Suma, and we were talking about your latest release, you coined a phrase that had me in stitches, and I've repeated it several times, Michael, because it's hilarious. And you're like, "Hey, here it is, smoke it, fuck your clean palate bullshit, light this up right now and smoke it."
That's right. It was in a moment of passion and excitement, because we just got them and I was so excited and I wanted you guys to taste them. And I don't subscribe to this clean palate bullshit. not that it doesn't exist, because there's time and place for clean palates. But I find that assessing a cigar from the perspective of enjoyment should not be done on a clean palate. It should be done on a familiar palate.
Okay.
And the majority of even the greatest sommeliers and winemakers who I know who taste, when they are, if they're blending or if they're creating or if they're learning, then there's something to be said for a more neutral palate. But if they're, when it gets down to some of that final assessment stuff, it's always on a familiar palate. And I don't know what a clean palate is anyway. I mean, is it minty fresh after you brush your teeth? Do you not brush your teeth? I mean, how does one get to clean palate? For me, like even blending, it's not like we sit in a cigar factory with, you know, unsalted crackers and seltzer magically creating these blends. We're drinking coffee and scotch and eating and drinking and soda and water, and it's just, that's how we taste things all the time. So I find that it's always better represents the intention of this when you enjoy it familiarly.
Right. I think
But you didn't listen to me and you didn't smoke it, and so it's all right.
I know. I wanted to apologize for that, but I also wanted to smoke the cigar with you on my show tonight. So
that was, and because I'm such a disorganized mess, I forgot to even reach out and send you something. So I'm glad you waited. It was worth it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But true to form, I did smoke a few cigars today, so that wouldn't
Good.
have that clean palate. And I thought, as a fun exercise, I texted you earlier today. And I was like, hey, as a tribute to the fuck your clean palate bullshit, we're gonna bring several drinks to pair with our cigar so we can have a mix mash of palate and everything. So people have probably noticed I just popped open a bottle of wine. It's from the vineyard that I've featured on this show before. It's Grape Creek Vineyards. It's based out of here, Texas. It's their 2021 Grand Rouge, which is a unique blend of Tempranillo and Merlot.
Fancy.
Yeah, it's kind of juicy. It's a little fruity, like really kind of blueberry forward, a little bit of leather notes too, and some like floral
I'm
kind
also
of.
in wine mode to begin. This is a Pinot Noir from a guy named Dan Costa, who has a new wine label called Convene, and it's Sonoma. I think it's Russian River,
Ooh,
but
nice.
Monster Pinot.
I'm a big fan of Pinot from the Yamhill Valley in Oregon.
Yeah,
Like that's kind
delicious.
of my go-to Pinots and stuff. But the Russian River Valley is fantastic stuff. Do you know what? Do you happen to know what year it is?
I didn't look. Well, he just started, so 20. I think it's the 2019 vintage.
That was a good year. That was a good year in California.
18 or 19.
Yeah.
Whoops, sorry.
Oh. I've also got a cup of coffee.
Nice.
Do have some seltzer, and then I have some scotch as well. Some
It sounds like a cocktail. What do you think that would be? Like equal parts coffee, red wine, scotch.
uh
Not good. Never mind.
yeah,
Not
so
good.
it's called a chronic problem. That's
Yeah,
what the cocktail's called.
yeah. I
This
got I got a little Knob Creek single barrel rye that was a barrel pick from my friends at Napa Cigars in Napa. Great shop. They have a beautiful bar. And I also have, just in case, a little Harlem Standard bourbon, and that is 111 proof. So no better way to finish an evening of sipping and conversation than 111 proof bourbon.
definitely. Yeah, the scotch I'm drinking is Bunnahabhain. It's label that most people probably aren't familiar with in this country, but I was in Scotland a few weeks ago before the trade show, and one of my bartenders suggested this one, and I got it, and I really enjoyed it. And
Killer.
so, not a lot of age to this one. It's a little bit younger, but it's a nice, easygoing Scotch too, which is cool. So
Good.
I'll be drinking that later. Um, right now I'll just enjoy my coffee and wine and let those two offset while I smoke my Suma. So I love Sean Miles, Mitch's comment. The cocktail is called acid reflux. Good call. That's a good one. So Michael, let's again to talk more about the Suma here. This like you as you mentioned, this is the first the newest core from under the Ferio Tego name and line. So we have the Elegancia and the Generoso, which are annual releases, but ongoing, but they will have annual, I guess, annual
Yeah, main
vintages. And
difference is Elegancia and Generoso are made once annually. So 21s, we made a set number of Elegancia and Generoso, put them in market. When they're gone, they're gone. There's no reorder until the 22s were released. 22s were released. We made more of them. Still one size in the two blends, in the travel humidors. Out they go. You can order them while inventory remains, but once the 22 is sold out, the 22 is sold out, and then we release the 23. In the case of Suma is just like Timeless Collection, Metropolitan Selection, and the majority of handmade premium cigars on the American market, where they are made in regular production throughout the year based on your procurement plan and however demand makes you forecast, right? So as the brand grows, we'll make more of it, but the intention is of course, to blend it consistently, and to keep it in market uninterrupted in the 4 sizes.
So the like I think what's really interesting about this is like what I really liked where you went with it is the fact that you created this authentically new blend, and it really I think it really fits well under the Ferio Tego line, because like everything else, under the Ferio Tego brand, Timeless, Metropolitan, as you mentioned a second ago, those are all legacy brands, that you have brought over and brought back. Whereas like this, for example, is something new, just like Elegancia and Generoso were. So it kind of fits really well under that portfolio. Is that why you went that direction rather than, say, putting this under Timeless or something?
Yeah, I mean, look, Ferio Tego is our flagship brand. I mean, we are super proud to have Timeless Collection, super proud to have Metropolitan. Those are blends that people have depended on, as long as almost 30 years with the Host, and with the Metropolitan Connecticut and Maduro. Obviously, Timeless, those blends are important to me. Those are my first projects. So carrying on that work and restoring those to market was a very important part of the Ferio Tego story. But make no mistake, it is a Ferio Tego story. And moving forward, we will certainly continue to grow and pay attention to and support Timeless and Metropolitan, because they are near and dear to our hearts, and they're great. But Ferio Tego is the flagship brand. It's the halo under which those brands exist and will grow. And flagships need core. The thought behind Elegancia and Generoso was really to do something thoughtful and different first, but also something that was an easier pill to swallow from a launch perspective, when you consider that we, as a new company, put 9 blends into market in 60 days, plus the Elegancia and Generoso.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing what a big lift that would be, not just for us and for our factories, but for our partners, we thought it made the most sense to lead with Elegancia and Generoso. 2 SKUs is a very manageable placement for a new brand. It's a very easy story to tell. So it's easier for our retail partners to explain what Ferio Tego is when there's just 1 size, 1 concept, 2 blends, and then allow Timeless and Metropolitan to reestablish their roots in the ecosystem that is the humidors throughout the country. At the same time, of course, then working towards what would this core line ultimately be, and how does it fit, and then when is the thoughtful time to release it? And so we thought, after 2 of the releases of Elegancia and Generoso, that it would make the most sense to do it at this PCA.
That's fantastic. I think what was clever about the blend and the name process too, and this, because I think this caught most people off guard off the get. But if you read past the name and actually understand what you were trying to accomplish, it kind of makes sense. Suma does not, despite what the binder is on this cigar, does not stand for Ferio Tego Sumatra.
No, sir.
So talk a little bit about the name and why you selected it for your first core.
Every time you release something, it kind of is, at least for me, it is a summa moment, meaning that summa in Latin is a synthesis of the body of work to date. It's sort of the sum of all things so far, an embodiment of that. And I think I create like an artist. I'm a drummer. We've talked about that a lot of times. So there's always this desire to get better and this desire to, you know, play better grooves and write better songs and just be a better musician. And it's the same with this, but you don't forget the stuff from the past, and sometimes you still have to play the stuff from the past the way you played it, um, but you're still trying to evolve and create new things. And so this, to finally have a core under the Ferio Tego name, Suma really represents precisely what this is. It's a blend that is um, obviously unique within our portfolio. When you light this up, it tastes like nothing that is available within Metropolitan Timeless or Ferio Tego today. But I also believe that its uniqueness extends beyond the framework of our portfolio and extends to the walls of the humidors and retail stores throughout the country. I believe that this Suma is a true embodiment of certainly my work, but what I've learned in industry and what I've tasted in industry in the last, now 24 years in the business. Those are summed up in this project.
I liked how when I first read about it, like you talked about this, some Suma being a body of work, and I think that's apropos. Well, one could say like, well, that represents any blend that anyone puts together, but I think that's the point. Not to put words in your mouth, Michael, but
but I guess it depends. Let's face it, there are lots of products that are brought to market to grow a business, to add facings, to get momentum, to get more share, like all of those things. The typical economics when you're running a business is you scale. But the why, the intention, I think, is different. And as an artist, particularly, I come from a jazz discipline. When you look outside of mainstream music, the release of an album is less about selling albums and more about an update to where we are in the curve of this artist's creative career. And I think that's the way I approach our projects, is less about, it's been a year, we need another album, we need another hit, we need another. It's less about that because the body of work is out there for people to enjoy. It's working in the studio and finding that unique sound or that unique hook to a chorus, whatever that thing is, that when it finally lands, people are like, man, I remember the last album and I still love that album, but now I've listened to this and these are the noticeable differences that I hear and appreciate as far as the evolution of this artist's creativity. And that's the way I approach this, which may sound completely ridiculous to, premium cigar consumers, but that's the curse of an artist, is that desire to be better at your discipline, and that takes a lot longer than just trying to sell more albums.
Well, I think there's so many parallels. Coop and Dave Burke have the Cigar Jukebox show, and there's so many parallels between music and cigars. Anyway, when you think about it, like there are some that again, not to steal your trademark, Michael, but there are some that are timeless, that just always bring back this nostalgic wherewithal with it. This experience. You remember where you were when you first smoked it. You remember the way it smelled, the way it tasted, the way you felt. There's all of that. There's the one-hit wonders, right? There's the one, and there's, and then for the people who are privileged enough to make this a career and put 20, 30, 50 multi-generational years into it, it's it has
I've
this
said this a
effect.
lot, but I don't know that I've said it on with you. Um, but you remember back in the early COVID days, I used to do these lives, like
Yeah,
early on the Instagram live thing,
yeah.
and I would talk with different people, not cigar people. I talked to a couple cigar people, but just other just successful people, and I would just have a conversation. And one of them was a very famous bass player named Christian McBride.
Love that interview. That was great.
Oh, it was really fun. But it was in that interview that I had this moment where I had this realization that premium cigars are to tobacco what jazz is to music. It's it's one of the hardest musics to play. It probably pays the least, is the least appreciated, the most misunderstood, um, the hardest to do consistently. And yet, if you are one of the lucky few who appreciate jazz, whether you're an artist who performs it or whether you're just a consumer of jazz who listens to it and loves it, when you find other people who appreciate that art and speak that language, it is a kinship that is far more intimate than people you've known, your whole life. And cigars are very much that way. When you're, as you said, privileged enough to make a living at it, or privileged enough to just discover the hobby and appreciate the work that goes in, appreciate the nuance and the flavors that can be developed, and you speak the language. When you see someone enjoy a cigar in a park on a bench across the street, you know something about that person far more intimately than people in their life that don't understand just how valuable and important this is. And there are very few things like that, like jazz, like cigars, like wine to some extent. Um, I just think we're very lucky to be able to participate in any way in this industry, making a living
Yeah.
as a consumer, whatever it is. It really is. It really is fortunate.
I've had a lot of coworkers because my day job, and then a couple of people even at my church today were like, "Hey, it looked like you had such a great time, trade show, man. Like, there's like this, it's like a whole world." And I'm like, "Yeah, it is, but it's like a small world, and it's really interesting." I was telling my kids about, like, they're like, "Well, what did you do all day?" And you know, my oldest especially knows about smoking cigars, as he likes to call them. And but I was like, I met with friends. I met with friends because that was the one of the funnest things my son has ever said to me. He's like, we were driving home from school one day. He's like, Daddy, I know what I want to be when I grow up. And I was like, awesome, tell me. He's like, I want to be a zookeeper like mommy. I was like, dude, that'll make her so happy. And he's like, but I also want to do what you do. And it really occurred to me in that second. I was like, okay, what is my son's impression of what I do? Because it's not like I'm not a construction worker. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have, I'm just in sales, computer software. So, and I said, son, tell me what is my job? What do I do for a living? And he's like, oh, you smoke cigars and talk to your friends all day. It's just kind of what I
I
do
love it.
because I'm on Zoom all day, pretty
That's
much.
all
So
it is.
yeah. So
Smoke cigars and talk to your friends.
so I'm like, yeah, he's like, yeah, I want to do that too. I'm like, great, cool, awesome.
That's
But
great, man. It's
it's
nice. I mean, look, I think we have to be careful, obviously, because this is an industry that falls within a category that is not one that our kids should be bragging about in elementary school and middle school.
yes,
And so,
thousand
on the
percent.
one side, it's important to educate those kids that see it. We're obviously not doing anything that would cause them to be attracted to the product itself. But even,
Right.
when they see daddy and his dad friends, oh, you're gonna come over and smoke cigars. But what I appreciate is they all think it's gross.
Hmm.
They all think it stinks, but they also see the the camaraderie and um and fun that is had around this. And
Yeah.
And I think they see that and appreciate it. I don't know if they necessarily understand it, but it's certainly something that I think resonates with them. And that's important, you know, when you're making life choices, that you can find something that you love and you can make a living. And even though it's not particularly conventional by any means,
Mhm.
that there's still a pathway to make a living unconventionally by pursuing something that you're passionate about.
Yeah, it's really important distinction too. Like I'm not trying to put like any thing around it or backpedal at all, but it's a really, like, to your point though, it is about education. My son very much knows that it's for grown-ups. Here to your exact point, yeah, he's not fond of the way it smells. Uh, in fact,
I think that's great.
his favorite part is when I'm done with the cigar, so that he can see, so he can trample on it. That's one of his favorite things that he likes to do.
Oh,
So takes my
make
old
sure
ones
it's
out of
out.
ashtray. Yes, when it's out of ashtrays, loves to do it. So, but that's, yeah, no, it's. I think those are all important points too, Michael. But I think that what's really cool too, like you said, that they see that it brings people together, and that when we bring, that's again to kind of take us full circle to be I guess our theme for tonight. Like, go back to the top of the conversation when we're talking about what Ferio Tego has done and the relationships that you've cultivated over the years and stuff. Is this incredible network of people that just really help each other out and stuff, which is cool.
Very cool.
So so um to get back to what we're talking about with Suma in particular, I wanted to ask this question because I understood why you put this again under the Ferio Tego line. You just talked about that as well and articulated it. But my question also was, is it even possible, because of trademarks, is it even possible if you wanted to create something under Timeless or Metropolitan or Host, is that even possible with trademarks? Like, to create an extension under those
Yeah.
brands?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if there was any limitation there whatsoever.
No, no.
Okay.
Wide open. Stay
Okay.
tuned.
Nice. Um, the blend about this, so if we could get just a little bit of wrapper binder filler, we don't do that much of this on the show, but I thought it was really interesting too. The double Ecuadorian
Yeah.
Corojo, and then Ecuadorian Sumatra, which again the cigar is not named after, on the binder, and then Dominican Nicaraguan in the fillers, correct?
Yes. Heavy Nicaragua. Not, I shouldn't say heavy. Not a, probably about 50-50 Nicaragua. But when you think about typical Dominican cigars, particularly the ones that I make that incorporate Nicaragua, it is generally not dominant Nicaragua. It's typically one variety, you know, one contribution. But this has a few.
I'm gonna take a stab at this too, and if you can't answer, don't want to answer, that's fine. There's a really nice sweetness though coming off of the cigar. I'm willing to guess that some of that Nicaraguan is probably jalapa, because jalapa is known for its kind of sweetness. So if I'm taking a stab at it, if you don't want to share, Michael, that's fine.
I don't think I have to go back and look at my notes. I'm pretty sure there is not jalapa in the filler.
Okay.
Um, but I think the sweetness, is it a taste or is it a texture? Because for me, there is, like, this doesn't taste sweet and it's not dominant on the tip of my tongue where sweet things generally impact.
Hmm.
But there is a viscosity to the mouthfeel of this blend that is silky, syrupy, that feels like something sugary on your palate, which to me, I found when we made the move from Dominican Corojo to Ecuador Corojo, having that double Ecuador influence and Ecuador being known for some of that silkiness, that's where I found that real viscous sense to the mouthfeel to really come out and shine. And that may not be what you're saying at all. So my apologies if I just completely
No,
screwed up.
no,
But
actually, no. I'll follow you along there, because I think that was something that I was going to talk about was was the silkiness of the smoke. It does coat the palate. I guess that's where that sensation's coming from. Because you're right, I'm not getting it on the tip of my tongue. Where I am getting like the wine, for instance, I can taste that right off the get.
Yeah.
So, but like even before I had some wine, when I was just smoking this with coffee, I had that kind of sweet effect. But it's not like some tobaccos too, like where like broadleaf, for instance, has that kind of rustic
Bittersweet.
bittersweetness to it.
Yep.
You know, where it's just kind of, rich. And you can literally taste it on the tip of your tongue. So no, I'm with you on that. That makes sense now.
For me, this is much more. This is texture. That's that mouthfeel, lingering viscosity. It's fatty almost. It's like when you eat a delicious steak, properly marbled, and that texture that coats your mouth with that ever so slight fatty slickness. You
Mhm.
know, that is what this has, my opinion.
Yeah, no, this is a very rich cigar. And again, it's not rich in the sense of like we were talking about, like you bite into a huge like sugary dessert. It's not that kind of rich. It's just very flavorful and very flavor
But at
forward.
this point, I think that's kind of indicative of my style, that I don't, there are enough cigars that will make you feel them on the market that are great. I mean, I'm inspired by a lot of them that have an intensity that whether it's whether it's deliberately there via nicotine or whether it's a byproduct of purely the fortitude that they're trying to create in the blend through flavor, but that's just not my style. I think every blend I make, there's always this balance of body, mouthfeel, flavor, and tempering ferocity at all costs. I
Um,
want you to feel the cigar in your soul. I don't want you to feel it in your stomach or in your head, you know?
oh, that's fair. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not like you said, like it's not a nicotine bomb. It doesn't hit you that way, but it's just very flavor forward. It's very rich. It's very, like you said, there's a way that this kind of just tosses, ping pongs around your palate a little bit and just it just lingers in a really nice way. Even the retrohale doesn't, it's not a long retrohale. I'm a big fan of long retrohales, but it's not short, but it's like right in the middle. It's like it's a nice little sweet spot for you that where it kind of just lingers just the right amount.
But I
Is
think
it
that's one of the clearest indications that the tobaccos themselves have been cured and fermented properly, have been appropriately aged, so that what is coming through your nose in a retro are the nuances and subtleties that make the cigar complex. It is not the ferocity of the tobacco that I find distressing when I put it through my nose. And I would like to think that that is a real point of differentiation for a blend that is arguably this full-bodied, for a blend that is this rich and dense in mouthfeel and texture and weight, and yet through the nose does exactly what it should do, which is highlight those nuances and subtleties.
What I really like about this, I'm past the first third. I'm in like halfway through the second third at this point already, which I'm surprised I'm smoking this fast. But I guess it's indicative of how enjoyable it is. But there's been this nice transition at this point into a different flavor components that I wasn't getting into that first third. You rarely see that. I think there are complex cigars that have like this roller coaster ride a little bit that kind of carry over certain notes, and there's certainly some of that here. But like, there's a really distinct transition right now to different flavor components that's really nice. It's a nice transition. Sometimes there's abrupt. It's like, oh, you're smoking, and then all of a sudden, like, no one wants a huge chunk of char flavor note or acid,
I
acidity
believe
and
so
stuff.
much in storytelling, and you do that when you write music, you do that when you perform, you do that in plays and theater, you do it in writing articles. There's got to be a journey. You need something that's compelling. You need a crescendo in the music at some point. You need a bridge in a good song. Like there's got to be movement to make the story worth continuing. And it's I think it's a through line in a lot of the blends that I've done. Even if you look at the timeless blends, they never end the way they began. And some people don't like that. Some people like a cigar that you light up and it's just straightforward all the way through. Metropolitan is probably the closest to that. More old world in style, less about complexity and nuance, and more just about delivering what you want when you want it all the way through. But I think part of that is the evolution of the artist, and you get a little more eccentric, and part of it too, I think, is as a creator, you have to keep yourself interested, and challenge yourself and find new ways to express your work. And so being able to craft those moments in a cigar where the story gets more intense or goes in a direction you didn't think it was going, that's an important part of the stories we're telling as Ferio Tego, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, you spent a lot of time down at Quesada, which is where the cigar is made. And over the past year, and we knew you were working on something just because you were, again, you were kind of documenting the journey without telling us about it, which was kind of cool to watch. And I really like your creative process too, just because, you document it in a way that's not like verbose or over the top. And, you're not talking about a lot of hoopla. You're talking about process, and you can see it, in the way that you document it with like photos and video that you do and stuff, which is really cool to enjoy. Now, I know you've got several partnerships in this business and everything. Was there a reason why Suma was a good fit for Quesada and not Plasencia, where some of your other cigars are made, or was it just how it worked out?
No, I mean, I have blends in evolution in all three factories. So Plasencia in Nicaragua, Quesada in Dominican, and the affectionately known as the Camacho factory in Honduras, which is called Agroindustrias. There's constant creative work happening in all three factories, playing with blends, exploring. This one was specifically started in the Quesada factory, and was just further along and fit for what this project was meant to be.
Right.
So purely stars aligning.
Yeah, I have to imagine I knew you weren't going to tell us like you were putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. But I was just interested if is it like so the way that cigars come together, Michael, for you, especially since you have the opportunity and the privilege of working with, as you said, three pretty amazing factories, and they all have incredible tobacco. Is it the tobaccos themselves, the way that, the blends start to come together, or, like you wouldn't, I guess what I'm trying to get at is there, you would never attempt to make is there a world where you would never attempt to make this cigar in another factory because they just don't have whatever, fill in the blank, so to speak, to make this blend what it is, what we're smoking?
The way I create is not write a blend on paper and then go source the materials and the place to go make it. It's not like I'm designing a piece of machinery and I've patented the design of how I know it's going to go together, and then I need to go find a manufacturer that can make it to my specifications. It's a completely collaborative process. But if I look back at the work specifically with Plasencia and Quesada, I think it's fair to say that if you go back to like 2011, 2012, with the original Timeless collections, for example, and if you look at the four blends of Timeless, 2 are made in Dominican with Quesada, 2 are made in Nicaragua with Plasencia. None of them taste like their factory of origin, particularly at the time that they were developed. So if you think of the Timeless Prestige 2012, that did not taste like a Quesada blend on the market in 2012. Sterling in 2014, total departure from everything. If you look at Supreme and Panamericana, whether you consider it, should you recall the Plasencia blends of that era, 2012, 2014, that was before the very successful launch of the Plasencia namesake brand in market
Right.
today. The blends that we developed together tasted completely unlike anything that came out of those factories. But arguably, we're using the same tobaccos, right? They're theirs. They're not mine. I didn't bring my bales with me down there and said, I want you to use these. We work together collaboratively. But I think it comes down to the intention of the artist. And that's what is so crazy about our business, that you can take the same tobaccos from the same place, and just by adding your touch, adding your interpretation and your bias and your consideration and what's more or less valuable to you, nets a completely different experience. And so, using the same pantry in the same kitchen, I create, together with them, of course, we create flavors that are just unique and different. But I would never work on a blend in Dominican and then say, I want to make this in Nicaragua, because there's no way you could replicate the work that's been done, leading up to that moment. So that's why when we brought Timeless and Metropolitan back, we didn't even consider other manufacturing.
Right.
Because you have to rely on the people that know your palate, know the way you think, know the way you taste, know the history of the way those have tasted in the past, to deliver that experience on your behalf.
Well, I find it even interesting. Like, let's just say you took these same tobaccos. Let's just say you took some tobaccos from Quesada, right? The same tobaccos, everything, right? And you just moved them to Plasencia, and you said, "Here,
If
Mr.
I
Andres."
shipped 1 bale each of the tobaccos that this blend requires, and I sent them to Plasencia and said, "Here's the blend, make them for me," they would not taste the same.
They would not taste the same. That's
No way.
that's the remarkable thing about it. That's the incredible thing. It's unbelievable how that works. That's why when people change factories, like, they can say the blend's the same or something like that, and that's just,
The blend can be the same, but the
Yeah.
experience is likely not.
Yeah, exactly,
But
1000%.
that also depends on the blend. So it would be easier to move old world, more linear, less complex experiences from factory to factory. A blend like Metropolitan Connecticut, for example, that was developed in the 90s, granted, we put a little polish on it with Ferio, but nevertheless, that's a much more mainstream, very traditional type of blend that might be more easily, not replicated, but produced in a way that is more familiar. But there is no way a Timeless blend could be moved, or a Ferio Tego blend could be moved. And the same the other way. If I tried to make the Generoso at Quesada, and Plasencia shipped all the tobaccos there, it wouldn't work.
It's crazy. It's crazy how that works. Like, it's unbelievable to me. Like, the subtleties in this business. I had the opportunity to sit with Hanky Kellner when I was down at Davidoff a few years ago, and he was talking about, we were sampling tobaccos from it was the same tobacco, it was the same seed, and they were both Dominican because they were literally grown miles apart. And we're not talking hundreds of miles, we're talking like 5 miles apart. And
so you were same seed, same vintage, same priming,
same factory.
just
Yeah.
different geography from
It,
microclimate to microclimate.
yeah, and and like different soil, obviously too. So like it completely changed the taste of the tobacco. It was unbelievable. Like I couldn't believe it.
I just did a panel at this trade show, and the panelists were Christian Aroa, Nestor Plasencia Jr., and Manuel Quesada. And it was a blending seminar, but it was really blending from the perspective of the farm and how the farm influences blending later. And Christian was saying that he has a farm where the 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 same tobacco from the same farm, just at different areas of the farm, net out completely different characteristics later. So he has to take the actual plot within the farm into consideration for what ultimately that tobacco will yield from a experience standpoint. It's bonkers.
It is. That was such a great session too, and I thought I think it was really special the fact that you kind of moderated it as well. Because Michael, you have this uncanny ability, and you do it every year too, or the last few years at least at the Great Smoke with you hosting that too. You have this way of understanding from someone like Christian Iroa and Manuel Casada's perspective, laying out the questions to them for them to be able to answer and then to convey that message to the layman in a way that I haven't really in a way that's truly remarkable, because I think that's a really fine line, because I'm a tobacco nerd, like I'm a cigar nerd, I'm a cigar geek, like I'm here for it, right? Like I could listen to all three of those guys talk for hours and never get bored and pick up 98% of what they're talking to. But like the crowd that they were playing to, as much as we're all in the industry, there are varying degrees of understanding and tobacco intelligence, I'll call it. And so for you to be able to moderate that and relay all that incredible knowledge, and them too, I want to give them credit as well. It wasn't just you, but it was just an incredibly well done job. So I just wanted to say that to
Thanks,
you.
man. I'm very lucky that at 43 years old, I'm still young for this industry, but I've been in it since I was 19. So I've got 24 years in. I think that's right? 43, 19. Is that 24? I'm a drummer, not a math major. Somewhere around there. I've got 24 years in. I'm so fortunate to have worked for the people that I've worked for, and then to have been around people that were generous enough with their time to teach me along the way, and allow me to just shadow and learn and ask questions, and so to have a conversation like that with those guys. I mean, here's what's crazy about that panel. Christian was the very first cigar factory I ever went to in 2003. I was 23 years old, and Christian's, I think he just turned 50 or 51, so he's got
He's 51.
7, 8 years on me. So we're pretty close in age. So he was quite young when I met him, and so we got along great as just young guys, and I could soak up a lot from him, and he was willing to share it. Manolo, I went to Dominican Republic in 2004 and became, no secret, very close with his family and spending a lot of time there. I met Nestor somewhere around 06, and then started working closely with him in 2011. So being on a stage with them and being able to moderate a discussion like that was unique for me, because these are three of my biggest mentors, in the truest sense of the word. But they're also people who I know the way they speak. I know their factories and their processes a bit more intimately than perhaps other folks. And so that conversation was an easier one, I think, for me to help lead, just because of my experience and awareness of how they work. And I loved the fact that we were able to talk about stuff, as you mentioned. It's a pretty mature audience. I mean, this is not Cigar 101.
Mm-hmm.
These are varying degrees of expertise, but 100% expertise in the room, I thought it was important that we talk about things that were more likely to be new for the majority of people in the room, which is why we focused on the farm and soil and seeds and that kind of stuff. It was a blast, man. That was one of the fastest 50-minute conversations I have ever had. I hope they recorded it, because I want to go back and watch it to actually retain what was shared.
I think they did. That'd probably be a question for PCA, but it would be a shame if they didn't, because I think that it was very magical in a way. I've told this story several times. My first PCA, or IPCPR as it was back then, we walked by, I think it was Gla Galera's booth, and it was off to the side, and Hochi Blanco, Manolo Casada, and Hanky Kellner were sitting, and nobody was around them. It was just those three guys. And got to be a fly in that wall in that conversation, right? Just like, I mean, the knowledge is just getting floated around and tossed around. I mean, they could have been talking about the cheeseburgers they had for lunch, for all I know.
They probably were.
Yeah, but I mean, if they at all were dipping into the aspects of tobacco, it was just incredible. So we mentioned at the top of the show too about the cocktail hour that you hosted, and thank you again for the invitation, Michael, for that, because that was wonderful. Not only was the food and the wine wonderful, and the company, and but we had a few of us in the media, John McTavish, Sharon Loomis, myself, and Ben Lee, had the opportunity to stand and have a conversation with Manolo Casada for about 40 minutes, which was just awesome.
Never gets old, man.
It never does. Like, we talked, I mean, there was a lot of cigar talk, but there was a lot of other chatting too. And Manolo actually poked fun at me a couple of times, which was funny. He's like, "Hey, do you ever smile?" And I was like, "I'm happy, man. I'm just tired." So but it was you just don't get that kind of opportunity. And for again, to the point of the panel, that's such a rare point, especially for some of these guys who don't travel as much as they used to earlier in their careers. They don't do a lot of in-store events, if any, anymore. What an incredible opportunity that was for retailers to hear from these folks who make some of the finest cigars in the market, which is not saying no, it's nothing to belittle, because it's incredible. So to piggyback on that, to go into PCA and this experience, other than the whole dreadful hot boxing in a UPS warehouse with your new cigars and everything, I felt like I wanted to get your take on this, Michael. I thought the vibe of the show was very much like the last 2 years. It was very positive. People were really happy to be there, which I couldn't say that honestly in 2019. In 2019, there was a lot of, in the aisles, so to speak, there was a lot of moaning and groaning, and it just didn't feel. I mean, I was still in cloud nine because I was still relatively new at the time, but the vibe was still pretty positive. What did it feel like to you in comparison to the last 2 years?
I agree. I think what I loved about the last 2 years was the fact that because of COVID, there were a lot of people who stayed home. So if we take the cons to that scenario, of course, we'll take all of the COVID effect on our industry. There were no deals to be had because there was no inventory to be had, and everything was pre-sold before it was shipped, and business was booming. So the show took had a slightly different reason to be there, because there were no major deals. There also was no significant inventory. But what you also saw was people opt in to being together. And so that created a very pre-qualified sense of optimism to set the temperature for that room in a way that historically we just didn't have. So you had everyone wanted to be and anyone who wanted to be in the room was in the room.
Right.
And that felt great. And I remember we had that discussion in 2021, specifically because I had a booth with no product. I mean, we had an empty booth, and yet it was such an overwhelmingly positive show because of the people who were there, who just wanted to be there and support. And they wanted to support their friends and companies in the industry, and they also wanted to support the industry itself. Now, there are some very good reasons why people weren't there. And some of those were health, some of those were economic and financial, and some of those were straight business. The other thing that you can't ignore was that leading up to 2019, there was a lot of dialogue back and forth between the association, between retailers, between manufacturers. And I think it's important to distinguish that I would not necessarily call them conflicts, although I think sometimes they get characterized as conflicts. But nobody within, I don't know of a single member in good standing that is advocating against the handmade premium cigar industry and its successful future. Where I think there becomes more heated dialogue is the points that we agree on and the points that we don't agree on. And then we tend to get in our corners. But unquestionably, there is way more that we agree on as an industry than we disagree. But the amplification of the points of disagreement were really blasted way louder than the points of agreement. And I think that created for a very tense 2019 show. 2020 would have been an interesting show had COVID not occurred, because it would have been theoretically a normal show with the major absence of several big vendors. But then COVID caused that show not to happen at all. And then there was a slow crawl back. So I think what this show represented was this perfect snapshot in time where you have to recognize the work that has been done since 2019 and the progress that has been made since 2019 as an industry. There's been a lot of conversations and a lot of, I think there has been as much stating of opinion as there has been listening to others. And I think that is clear when you look at show attendance. I'm also fortunate enough to be on the board of the PCA. So I know for a fact that when you look at the stores that were represented, the badges that were signed out, the number of rooms and nights that were reserved, all of those statistics, and I saw Jay on here earlier, so Jay, keep me honest, they are all basically second to our record year as an association. I forget what year that was. I thought the show was great. I thought it was filled with people who wanted to be there. I think there was a tremendous amount of optimism. And I also think it's the first show where this many people have been together in a moment of clarity for our industry from a regulatory standpoint that we have never had. Although we're still waiting for Meta's final remedy to his last ruling, there is clarity in the playbook, and we've never had that. So I think you saw a lot more innovation in new product, and that brings a sense of optimism. You had people who hadn't seen each other because they hadn't been to a show in 2 years. That brought a new sense of optimism. You had people who got their businesses in order over the last 2 years, implementing new point of sale, new route to market. And so overall, I think it was just a tremendous show. And frankly, I think the March show is going to be even better in New Orleans. In Vegas.
Do you think it was a huge positive to, or like, actually, I'll be a little bit more forward on this question, Michael. I'll say, I'll say it was a positive, and you can disagree with it if you want to, but the positive presence of STG in the form of Forged and Altidus back with a booth presence, not like necessarily in the size and capacity that they've had before, but a presence. Like, I feel like that was a really big positive step. And even though they weren't there officially, having Hoya to Nicaragua there and Drew Estate announcing that they would be returning in March, to your point earlier, kind of brought together the community like in a way that we haven't seen in 4 years now.
I have two perspectives. The first is, in the two examples that you just shared, and by the way, we're in a similar boat. We are a brand that is an independent member in good standing of the trade association. And to be clear, all of the companies that you mentioned, including those that historically have not participated the last couple of years, are all members in good standing of the trade association. And I think that's a really important point. So STG and Drew Estate, and whoever else wasn't there, they were all members in good standing of the trade association. They just said that they weren't attending the trade show. And there's a million reasons why people didn't come to the show, retailers, vendors alike. So that notwithstanding, I think it's important that we don't conflate all the issues into one. Every major industry participant is a member in good standing of the PCA. As it relates to the trade show, there are some companies who have come out and said that they will be back for 2024. I think that is great news. It's the biggest opportunity for our industry to be together, and so the more of us that are together is great. That said, no one knows how to run their company better than the people who are running their company, and so if there are still people who decide that they aren't there, retailers, vendors, I'm sure there was a reason for them not attending. But in the case of Hoya de Nicaragua, in the case of Forged, specifically in the Alec Bradley Room 101 brands, and even in the case of Ferio Tego, we are all dependent on distribution partners who represent us throughout the United States of America. And all of us had our distribution partners' personnel in booth supporting the sales and growth of our businesses. And that's what it should be.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. I think, saying that some of them were back this year, I think is perhaps overstating it. I think they were there in support of the brand that was the member and the registered booth holder, but all of it is positive. So I don't want to. That's not disparaging. That's not taking anything away. And I am really optimistic. Again, I think that the March show is going to be a record-breaking show for this association. March of 2024.
It certainly is. I mean, it certainly is setting up that way. I found, obviously your brand being one of the exceptions here, Michael, what we found too was that a lot of brands, it almost seemed like we're holding back a little bit, in comparison to trade shows in prior years. There wasn't, there certainly were new releases.
This year?
Yeah, this year. So there certainly were new releases, again, Suma being one, for you guys in specifically, but like other companies had them as well. But it seemed like a year of, again, more limited editions, which have become popular year over year. And then line extensions were very popular too. It seemed like in a lot of ways, companies were holding back. I mean, it was, we were 14 days out from the trade show with a lot of the releases that ended up being announced hadn't been announced yet. So it was getting pretty, pretty iffy there, kind of towards the end. towards the end of the home stretch, if you will, where a lot of companies just decided to work on what they have, and that's perfectly within their prerogative. I'm not necessarily just like being disparaging about it, but it just seemed like a lot of brands tended they seem to be holding back a little bit, and I'm hoping, and you can certainly weigh in on this. I'm hoping they're setting themselves up for a huge 2024 show in March.
Someone asked me, like, how am I preparing for the 24 show? It's only 6 months out. Is that changing the way we prepare? I don't plan our work based on trade show. I plan the work based on the work and when it's ready. The trade show for me, the number one goal in that show is to have as many conversations as possible about our relationship, what is working well, and what can we do better, and how would you consider a relationship at all for those that we're not doing business with? That's the priority. And if it happens to align with a launch, as it did with us, that was, of course, exciting. But I think we have gotten a bit distracted with using the show for launches and products and deals, and we've gotten away from the fact that this is a convention and trade show, not just a trade show. And to me, the convention piece is far more important than the trade show piece when you have, let's say, 70 or 80% of the industry's population in one city, in one building for 3 nights. The convention for me is the critical piece. And so that's how I track the success of our show, is how many conversations did we have?
Were there any conversations that were of note to you that really kind of stood out, or that have stood out over the years, where like, man, that that fostered this relationship, or that fostered this opportunity that never would have happened or transpired if it hadn't been for the trade show and convention, to your point?
100%. Every show, there's always one where you connect in a way that's meaningful, that hasn't happened in the past.
Just
And
one stand out in particular to you? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
well,
I apologize.
Actually, our friend Jay Davis. Jay is a great retailer. For those of you who don't know Jay Davis, Blue Smoke in Dallas, and he's got a great shop. He had sold some Timeless and Metropolitan in the past. Did not do particularly well for him in Texas for any number of reasons. And I bumped into him the night before the show started in I want to say it was the 22 show. And we just had a great conversation. And it wasn't even a conversation about Ferio Tego and asking for a sale. It was actually a conversation about retail and just business in general. And I remember it was the night before, I think, opening day of the show, and it was just such a great chat. And Jay and I have known each other for years, but we never really got to know each other that way. And that was a relationship that clearly cleared a path for what has become a tremendous partnership. I've done events with him in Dallas. In fact, it was the first trip I made to do events was to Dallas, and his store was the first one that we walked into. And he's been a tremendous partner. And now we both sit on the board together and we spend time together. But those, when you can sit in front of people and have a conversation, not a pitch, but just a conversation, and get to know one another in a way that is more meaningful than wrapper, binder, filler, and margin and deal. Those are the conversations that create the relationships that you and I love, and that are unique to this industry.
The opportunity to be on the board. I know you were voted in last year for the past year, you've been sitting a sitting member. What kind of perspectives has it offered to you that you would still be, I guess, in the dark about if you were not on the board, that has affected your, I guess, your perception and your overall business practice?
I'm not sure necessarily from a business practice standpoint, but from an association standpoint, being on the board gives you a different level of transparency and insight into the work being done. And it really highlights just how great the PCA is and the work that they do. I mean, I was fortunate, I was on the TAA board. That was also very illuminating. But the PCA is not a 5-day event. The PCA is a 365-day a year advocacy association for our industry that now is extending beyond the United States into global efforts. And I think we are on track now to do a better job communicating and highlighting all of the work being done. PCA just hired a guy named Antoine Reed, who is a great contributor. He's a great writer.
Brilliant writer. He's been a guest on my show.
He's awesome. Now he works full-time for PCA. And I think having him in the association in a new role dedicated to outbound communication of what we're doing and amplifying the message, not just of the association, but of our members, I think is going to be a huge benefit to the entire membership and industry, because I think it will, to a great extent, make clear the work that's being done, because they're not all wins. We now live in a press release mentality. Someone gets a new job and they are pleased to announce, on their LinkedIn page, this new headline. So everything is a headline, but you have to look at the work. And I was at my high school a few months ago, and I came across this quote, and the quote is that progress should be measured not by the proximity to the destination, but from your point of origin. I'm messing that up. I have to look it up again. But it's not about how close you are to getting where you think you want to be. You have to measure your progress from where you began. And when you measure progress from where you began, you can recognize the wins. I mean, even though it feels like you may be moving slowly, you are still further from your point of origin. And the PCA is so far beyond the point of origin. And you can take any point of origin. Take 2019, as you mentioned. 2019 to today, there's so much progress that has been made as an association, as an industry, hopefully as individual businesses. There's a lot to celebrate there. Yeah. Being on the board has provided a little more visibility for me.
I mean, in the 90 years that the organization has existed, I've been a part of it for such a small fraction of that it seems almost inconsequential. But in the short time that I've been a part of it, there have been so many vast improvements. Coop's been covering the trade show for over 10 years, and he even talks about that too. And, like you say, there's always ways to improve and criticisms and things like that. But it's the overall, when you look at the broader picture and where we've come from, to your point, to the point of origin, it's all that more impressive. I did want to get your thoughts on this, because this was kind of and since you're on the board and you brought up Antoine's incredible work with communication, there has been a contested point about the trade show covering press releases the way that media does. Cigar Aficionado, Cigar Coop, Half Wheel, etc. Right, and almost in a competitive state. How do you view that? Do you think that it dilutes the message at all by them covering product releases in the press release way, or do you think that it only adds to it, or is it to a different audience? You know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Michael. Your thoughts?
I have not heard criticism of it. I've been busy for the last few months, so maybe I haven't been paying attention. But I can't think of another industry that doesn't have an official trade journal that doesn't cover the relevant news of its members. I mean, I that doesn't strike me as a negative at all, particularly for an industry that is so underrepresented. Adding an authorized internal platform, you know, it's easy for people that have relationships to be able to blast out to the members of the media, but how does a new company even begin to get coverage?
Right.
You know, you just started a cigar business, you just opened up a retail store, you want to participate, you've got something important to share, you send it to the more sophisticated industry media, and they say, I never heard of this guy, I'm not going to cover it. You know, if you're a member in good standing, at least you're guaranteed a platform for some equal coverage and representation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how that's competitive. I mean, I don't believe there's any advertising or any kind of, you know, anything of that nature. I think it's purely finding a way to more effectively amplify the message of our industry in one place.
Okay.
I'm surprised that's met with criticism.
Yeah, I think it's the point of contention that I've heard from it is that it's not necessarily that the negative is that it's like another competitor in the room necessarily. It's the source of the information where, like, companies in the past who were previously more likely to spread the message across the board are, you know, when they've delivered it to, like, say, directly to the PCA, that's where it stops. We're like, well, hey, I already gave my info to the PCA, therefore that's good enough, right? So
well, but you're talking about individual. If a company has an announcement and they think it is sufficient to deliver that message to the PCA, perfect for me. I think that's brilliant. I would encourage everyone to only tell the PCA, and then that way I'll get more coverage from everyone else.
Oh, okay. I was like, please tell me you're being sarcastic. Okay, thank you. All right, cool. Good. I was like, Coop's about to kill me right now because Michael Herklots is going to change his press communication altogether.
No. Look, it goes back to relationships, and when you have a relationship like we have, I wouldn't consider. I don't like the idea of exclusives in general. It doesn't. We're not talking about earth-shattering news here. You know, where somehow, you know, major exclusives are somehow, you know, particularly valuable. I see it as you have an important message to tell. You share it with the media with whom you have great relationships, and that message then gets either copied and pasted for all to read, or gets engaged with follow-up to craft a more meaningful story. That's what the media is.
Indeed. So just a couple of other questions about the PCA, and we'll get into some fun segments here, Michael, to wrap up our evening. But to go back again to the trade show specifically, you know, I thought this was an interesting show. You know, it's the second year that Guy Fieri has attended, and been a huge, you know, been a huge part of it, and also a really great opportunity for people to congregate and to meet someone outside of the, you know, he's been a part of the industry for 2 years now, but to meet someone outside of the realm, so to speak. But then there were other people on the floor. You know, Chaz Palminteri released a cigar this year. Michael Cudlitz was just walking around. Noticed that. and I was like, that guy looks like Michael Cutlitz, and sure enough, I looked at his name tag, and it was Michael Cutlitz. So I was like, that was cool.
But he's also in the industry.
So yeah, I was gonna. So you know everybody. What I saw him wandering the aisles, and I was like, and nobody was talking about him. Everyone was talking about Chaz and Guy and Ocho Cinco and everything. But what what is his role in the industry? Since you know, I don't know. I'm like,
He is he's involved in the Red Phone Booth, which is a bar, kind of speakeasy bar model that's popping
oh,
up in cities
right,
that
yeah. There's
has a
one in
cigar
Atlanta. There's
component.
one in yeah. Okay, he's a part of that ownership group. That's cool.
Yep.
Oh man, yeah, that's a yeah. A couple of my friends in Atlanta go there all the time, and they love it. So that's interesting that he's a part of that. Yeah, he was just wandering around, like, and that's why I didn't. I mean, I recognized him, but I was like, but it was really, everyone else, Chaz and Guy, of course, had their entourages and stuff, and Michael Cudlitz just walking around by himself. I mean, on the star-studded level, obviously he's below those two guys, but it was cool to kind of just see him kind of meandering and stuff. Does Red Phone
I
Booth
think
carry Ferio Tego?
I don't. I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember. I know that we were engaged with them back and forth. I don't believe they carry it at the moment.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna make it a point next year in March if he's there to walk up to him, and I'll fix that for you, Michael. It's okay. I'm not a
I
paid
appreciate
employee.
that.
I'm not a
Listen, we
paid
got
employee, so
300 days. There's a lot of DMs that can be sent right now. If
yeah.
you're watching, DM Michael Cudlitz and tell him you want Ferio Tego at the Red Phone
Red
Booth.
Phone. Yeah, sounds good. Um, there was another component to that I wanted to kind of get your take on, just because again, you have so many relationships outside of this industry that are even related to this industry, right? A lot of your friendships are cultivated around cigars and everything. To see some of these folks become involved in the industry directly by either having a cigar brand or being part of an ownership group or something like that, that has to be um, over the years, especially as it's probably grown from your perspective, that has to be a huge positive to see people taking an interest in this industry. Like, to your point, is the jazz of the tobacco world.
You mean from a celebrity standpoint?
Yeah, or just outsiders in general. Like,
I mean, I think you have two different. I've had a lot of conversations with folks over the last handful of years, particularly as Ferio Tego was launched, um, with people saying, something like, "Oh, this looks like a good opportunity. I should start a cigar brand. I should open up a store. I should open up a lounge. I should do whatever." Like jazz, if you want to be a professional jazz musician for the money, you're going to be profoundly disappointed. The scale doesn't exist in the industry to deliver the riches that you're looking for. And I think largely that can be said for this industry. But if you're truly a fan, if you're truly passionate for the category, and you have a sense of reverence for the industry and its craft, and you're willing, whether it's investing your time, your money, your likeness, whatever it is, you're willing to put that up and participate in a meaningful way, then I hope you get welcomed with open arms. But for as many let's say high profile folks that were on the floor this year, there are 10 times that number that are no longer on the floor, that have been there over the years and that are gone. I don't know enough about those projects to speak intelligently about them, but I've spent enough time with Guy and with Eric to really appreciate Guy's level of reverence and admiration and respect for the industry, and his willingness to amplify a category that can bring a tremendous amount of heat for a mainstream celebrity like Guy. I give him a lot of credit for his involvement and advocacy for our industry. I really do. But whether you're high profile or not, and as an owner now, I have a very different perspective than I had in the past. Let me tell you, man, it's a big step to go all in and put your chips in the middle of the table on an industry like ours that is so misunderstood, that is constantly an unintended consequence of legislation, regulation. It's a big risk.
So
But
polarizing. Look at the
when
Nick
you
Jonas
love it,
cover. The Nick Jonas
you
cover
love
on
it,
Cigar
that's it.
Aficionado, right?
Yeah, I mean, what a silly response. Here's a guy who absolutely loves it and was willing to amplify and advocate his affection for this as a pop singer. I mean, that's a huge win for our industry. Huge. And the fact that it was met with such, I don't know what it was. Anger, skepticism, hate. It
Oh,
was
so marginalized on both sides, like from inside the industry too. Like we were like, not you and I,
absolutely.
but we as the industry wasn't really thrilled about it too. They thought it was,
No, industry people thought it was a sellout and a joke. Non-industry people thought he
it was a
was
sin.
right. And meanwhile, for him, it was probably as exciting as a Rolling Stone cover, because he's being recognized not for his work, but for his hobby. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I cut you off, Michael. I apologize. You were rolling. I just, I had that thought about it. Like it was, yeah, this to put yourself on the line, like Guy has, like he told that story about, he got his star on the Walk of Fame, and they said, "What now?" And that's the cliche, the cliche line to the person who's just won the Super Bowl, and they're like going to go to Disney World, right? Well, his version of Disney World is like, I'm going to go make a cigar.
But I give him
And
a lot of credit, man. I spent time with him at the Great Smoke. He came in Palm Beach. I interviewed him there. He's passionate. He's the real deal. And he's also authentic, because he's not claiming to be an expert. He's not claiming to be a blender. He's not claiming, he's not claiming to be anything that he's not. He is a chef, and he's a brand guy, and he's a guy that loves smoking cigars, and he wanted to collaborate on something and put his name on it and grow it. And that's what he did. And that's as far as his self-claimed expertise goes.
yeah,
I give him a lot of credit. He's good for our
1000%.
business. And I hope the other guys are too. I didn't meet Chaz this time around, and although I'd met him years ago.
I was going to ask you guys
There were
being
a
New
handful of
Yorkers.
football players there that have brands. I hope all those guys are in shops, doing events, going home, handing out cigars, and talking about what makes premium cigars different.
Yeah, with Ike Taylor, he's been part of the Howard G cigars brand since the beginning, since 2 years ago. And I've had the opportunity to interview him a couple times. Leon Searcy was there, of course. I didn't have the courage. I really wanted to ask. I said, how tempting would it be just to just run full throttle into the Sutliff booth and just full on tackle Ocho Cinco one last time? But I didn't. I really wanted to.
I wish you had.
It's really funny. Leon Searcy is a giant of a man, and he could clobber me with one swat of his hand. But it's Ike Taylor who still intimidates me the most out of those two guys.
Being a jazz musician, I'm unqualified to know who any of these people are. I obviously don't follow sports, so I feel terrible when I meet some of these guys over the years, and I have nothing.
I think they'd appreciate it though. So, all right, Mike. Well, let's go into some of our fun segments of the night, and this is a little bit later than we normally do it, but we were kind of rolling there on some of these topics, and I thought it was so I didn't want to disrupt it too much. So this is, of course, our presidential trivia segment, which is brought to you by United Cigars, featuring
You could have
Lagiana.
skipped this one. Okay,
it's
go ahead.
it's multiple choice, man. You're fine, and it has to do with your home city. So it's featuring La Giana Havana, distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, the Firecracker, and the highly acclaimed Atabey, Byron, and now Alfonso lines from Selected Tobacco. Smoke one today and start living united. So, Michael, which U.S. president other than George Washington was sworn into office in New York City? Was it A, James Garfield, B, John Adams, C, Franklin Pierce, or D, Chester Arthur?
In New York City, John Adams?
No, unfortunately
idea.
not. You want to take another guess?
No.
Okay. It was Chester Arthur.
Chester Arthur.
So after James Garfield's assassination, Chester Arthur was in New York and he was sworn into office in New York. So
How about
he was
that?
he was the last one. George Washington and John Adams actually did reside in New York during office. John Adams was the first to live in the White House, but the capital at the time was in Philadelphia. But there was like this back and forth between New York and Philadelphia until they actually settled on Washington as the U.S. capital, where obviously the White House was built, and John Adams and every president subsequently after that was called home. So, but yeah, Chester Arthur was the last president to swear the oath, take the oath of office in the city of New York. So, I know it's more of your like adopted city. What over the years and everything, what have you come to, and this is a really loaded question and I apologize, what have you come to love most about New York City?
It's probably the thing I also hate about it. There must be a degree of struggle and survival to live in New York City. Like I really, unless it doesn't matter actually what scale you're on. I mean, even the richest of the rich who have mansions on Fifth Avenue still are still stuck in traffic at some point. They're still overpaying for what they have. There's a sense of struggle, which means that you opt in to stay. And particularly, I moved as a 22-year-old drummer. When you move to New York, which is different than if you grow up there, but if you move to New York, you opt into that struggle, and there's constant sacrifice. So you need roommates, you're going to overpay in rent, you need to get an extra job. So there's a sense of conviction, whether you're moving for a finance job or you're moving as an artist, or whatever drew you to New York, it's a goal to get there, and then it's a goal to stay and be successful and make it happen. And so I think of the people that I've met throughout my time in New York, and with very few exceptions, everyone is driven, motivated, has this reason to be that is all shared by this love of this crazy, ridiculous city that's a complete melting pot of culture and cuisine and art and finance. And it's just, there is no other place like it on earth. And that's a big turnoff to a lot of people. I mean, if high population density and traffic and big buildings and high cost, all of that is just overwhelming, New York City can be a very overwhelming place. But it was a place that I always dreamed I'd be. And so I don't think there was a day when I lived there that I didn't come out of the subway and have a moment that was like, I still can't believe I'm here. Now, truth be told, I don't live in New York City anymore, and I don't commute to the city much anymore. But things change, but my love affair with the city has certainly not changed.
Would, if given the opportunity, and again, I know finances are probably a part of that because I know it's just absolutely ridiculous comparatively, you living in New Jersey as opposed to the city and everything. Would you move back?
No, no way. If finances were not an issue, I might grab a place there and spend more time there. But I did it. I lived it. The total equation of my life right now doesn't afford me the opportunity to enjoy the city the way I used to enjoy it. I have a family. We've got, we have other responsibilities. The days of restaurants and bars and cabs home at 3 a.m. and waking up at 8 and doing it all over again, those days are over. And I don't long for them either.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I had them, but I'm more grateful to go to bed at a reasonable hour and spend time with my kids and spend time with my wife, have a backyard, have a driveway where I can park my car. There's like basic things that you don't realize you have to give up in the city. And a lot of that has to do with just the ability to moment's notice, be free and go do something else. That's very limited when you live in New York.
Yeah, go to bed at a reasonable hour, unless you do my show on a Sunday night. So,
well, this time I don't have a flight the next day like I did last time, so I'm good.
That's good. I know we got a little off there, but that was our presidential trivia segment sponsored by United Cigars. Featuring, of course, La Giana Havana, distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, the Firecracker, and the highly acclaimed Atabey, Byron, and now Alfonso lines from Selected Tobacco. Smoke one today and start living united. Michael, I was, in our haste as we were putting together the show, and then with the PCA trade show and everything like that, there is a question I normally ask my guests to supply, and you, of course, have been a part of this in the last couple of years. I've always asked my guests to spotlight a charity or a nonprofit of their choice. I'm going to take a cue from you, and I think that we're going to feature the nonprofit that you mentioned earlier at the top of the night.
Can I make it? Can I change that?
Sure, absolutely.
I don't have a specific charity, so I need you to pick it because I didn't have time to research it. But I just found out before I jumped on this call that a classmate of mine just died from breast cancer. And she was a beautiful young wife and mother. And I just think that sucks. So I would like it to be a breast cancer charity tonight.
Okay. We can certainly do that. I have a couple in mind. I'll send some your way this week, and you can pick, and we'll
just pick.
Yeah. So
they didn't put anything up, so just pick one. But man, we got to find a solution to this.
Sorry for your loss, Michael.
Yeah, thanks.
It's tough news. Obviously your age, our age.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awful. Just unbelievable. Too many young people these days. Just, families growing, families with kids growing up without their parents because of things like this. So it's just awful.
Sucks.
Sorry. Yeah, it just sucks. There's no other way to say it. So we'll be putting that in the show notes. And you guys can check out the organization. And to Michael's point, let's do some good for that, and let's find a cure, because it sucks. There's just no other way to say it. But wanted to piggyback that a little bit. Unfortunately, and I'm sorry, Michael. I'm sorry for your loss. It's gotta shake you in a really real way, especially when you went to school with somebody, and like you said earlier, we're still young, and you get news like that. It's just disheartening. So, but
we got to live our lives. We need to enjoy life when we have it, and that's all we can do. No one's guaranteed tomorrow.
Indeed. Were you guys close over the years, or someone you knew really well? And
I wouldn't say super close. She was a year ahead of me. I think she married a classmate of mine. But interestingly, her oldest daughter participated in my high school program that I've helped support over the years. And so we reconnected when her daughter went through the program and graduated. But it's just a bummer.
Yeah, definitely. Well, wanted to go into a segment that we've had some fun with over the last few months and everything. I call it This or That. And Michael, it's basically like a lightning round a little bit. I give you a choice of two things. Some of these are cigar related, some of them are not. And you just pick one. So let's start off with food. Spicy or sweet buffalo wings?
Specifically in buffalo wings, I have to go with the authentic buffalo style of hot with Frank's.
Nice.
My wife is from Buffalo, and I have been conditioned to appreciate the culinary hometown favorite.
Nice.
So not super hot, but hot.
You want to know a fun and weird fact? Matt Booth hates the taste of buffalo sauce.
So do I, by the way. I detest it. But there is something about buffalo wings in Buffalo with a beer, with the blue cheese, the whole thing. It's ritualistic. I'd never order them anywhere else. But
when in Rome.
And wings in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Nothing better.
When in Rome. All right. All right. So specifically to wine, I was drinking a blend tonight. What wine did you pop again? What was you said Pinot.
It was a Pinot.
Okay. All right. So this is would you rather have a Syrah or Shiraz or Zinfandel? Syrah and Shiraz are synonymous with each other.
Good trivia. I would go this gets tricky. Zinfandel can often be mislabeled and miscategorized and get sugared up. Shiraz, specific to Australia, there's a lot of tough wines that are labeled as Shiraz. And so if by saying Syrah, I might risk getting a Shiraz that is of the variety I don't like, then I think that presents more risk. But I think Zinfandel is probably the less risky of the two. So I'm going to go Zin. Final answer.
Got it. All right. Would you, since you have both of them in front of you, this is going to be an interesting one. Rye or straight bourbon as it pertains to whiskey?
Without having tasted them first, I would probably go bourbon. Because some ryes get a little too affected in their spice. So this Knob Creek does not go to that extent, but some of them just get like a little too Christmas cookie, and I'm not in the mood for them. So I would go bourbon if it's just you have to pick one.
As it pertains to hors d'oeuvres, would you rather have a dish centered around caviar or around pate?
Caviar.
Why? I'm a fiend for both, so this was interesting for me.
Caviar, you said hors d'oeuvre.
Yeah.
So that's where we're starting. And caviar to me has a freshness. It's light. Typically the dishes crafted around caviar tend to be light and bright and easy and a nice place to get started. Little champagne, great. With pâtés like foie gras, and it's just so dense and so heavy. It tends not to stimulate my appetite, and I'm there for the main dish,
right?
Not for starters. So caviar to me is great.
Yeah.
I'd also have it for dessert if I had my option.
The deviled eggs, by the way, with the caviar was sensational.
Delicious.
Yeah, unbelievable. Okay, as it pertains to your name, I've called you Michael most of our relationship. Called you Mike on occasion. Which do you prefer if you had to pick?
Have we had the name conversation before on a show?
I
we
feel like
might
it's
have.
I feel like it's come up, but you've always been Michael to me. I've heard people say Mike recently a little bit more often, and so
Growing up,
I've found myself saying Mike.
my whole life I was Mike until I got to college. When I got to college, I more formally introduced myself as Michael, but everyone called me Herc. So I was
Right.
Herc all through college. When I got to New York, I put Michael on my business cards. I introduced myself as Michael, and I've been Michael ever since. Now that said, I don't care what people call me, as long as it's some version of one of those. So when people call me Mike, I'm not like caught off guard. I respond to it, but I feel more comfortable introducing myself as Michael. And I think most people today call me Michael. So I guess I prefer Michael, but I don't have a strong conviction either way. I prefer introducing myself as Michael.
Got it. All things being even, in the sense of like the environment is actually enjoyable, would you rather smoke a cigar in the summertime or in the wintertime? So what I mean by enjoyable, you're not outside freezing your ass off or sweating to death, but seasonally, when would you rather smoke a cigar?
That's tricky. So you're saying, when do I want to smoke a cigar? Let's say in the comfort of the indoors, in my favorite cigar bar.
Correct.
There is something about the holidays and smoking cigars for me, that feels a bit more celebratory than the summer. I love smoking cigars in summer. I actually prefer spring out of all of them, because there's something hopeful about spring when the air turns and it starts getting warm. We have 4 seasons up here, don't forget. But there is something about, and especially, I'll caveat this: New York City cigar bars approaching Christmas. There is an energy in those bars that just cannot be matched.
Mm-hmm.
It is high octane, celebratory. Everyone's dressed a little better. There's Christmas lights and garland and wreaths, and it's just, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, there's this like Rockwellian thing to smoking cigars in the wintertime, especially during the holidays, to your point. Like it's just it's almost
And
kind of magical in a sense.
especially if all things aren't equal, and if it's brutally cold outside and it's been snowing, and it's, if you don't have the opportunity to enjoy a cigar indoors on a regular basis, that is such a great moment when you reward yourself with being able to have a cigar indoors comfortably.
Definitely. So, being the artist that you are, I'm really interested to hear this answer. This is the last one. Would you want to be able to solve any math problem in your head or paint a masterpiece?
Paint a masterpiece. 100%.
All your business woes would be solved with the snap of your fingers in your head. All the back end stuff taken care of.
I have Brendan as my business partner.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, put the burden on him. Yeah.
For me, I find no joy in math, and I'm grateful for the tools that have been afforded us to be able to do the math. So I'm glad I know how to use Excel somewhat. I can use a calculator in between. I'm glad I was raised when I was raised, so I know how to do math on paper that doesn't involve writing paragraphs and dots and squares. So I can get through the math, but to take something from your brain and then put it, transfer that in some kind of tangible thing, is it's the dream. It's the dream of every artist to be able to do that. And I can't paint. So if I was able to have that talent and visually create, I take that over algebra any day.
I'm gonna corner Brendan next trade show in March, and I'm gonna ask him this question because I'd be interested to hear his answer to it. So
You know, I'll bet he would say the same thing.
I bet he would. I knowing I don't know him as well as you do, obviously, but I have the sneaking suspicion that's what he would say. But I'll save it. I'll ask him. I think that'll be fun.
Brendan loves to learn new things and do new things, and I feel like that would excite him. Like, he's really good at math, so he'd probably say, I can already solve it in my head.
There you go. Yeah, been there, done that. Awesome. Well, our next segment is brought to you by Pestaña Cigars. It's everybody eats. If you always make sure that your servant's towel is bigger than your appetite, everybody will always get theirs. Pestaña Cigars is more than just great cigars made by cool people. They embody an attitude of gratitude and grit. With Pestaña, everybody eats. So, Michael, so we've talked a little bit about food tonight. We've talked about food in the past as well. What has been your best experience of eating with other people? This is a tall order, knowing your background a little bit, but I wanted to see if we could narrow it down a little bit because I'd love to hear a story from this question.
We could do a whole show on this. I mean, honestly.
Well, there's a thought for next time we have you on.
Oh my God. I'm gonna have to like knock out a bunch of them, and I'm not. So let's skip obviously the meaningful family meals and you know, the last meals with relatives who are no longer with us and all those types of things, because those are very meaningful. I remember the first time when I moved to Boston, went to a steakhouse with now my cigar store friends who were significantly older than I was and had money, which I didn't. And we went to Abe and Louis Steakhouse, and it was a beautiful dry aged ribeye that came out medium rare. And as soon as it landed, I said, "That's not cooked." And they said, "It's perfectly cooked." And so that's an impossibility because I've had steak plenty of times and it's never looked like that. And they were like, "Okay,
You've never
son,
had steak.
Welcome." And I remember biting into that steak and it tasted like no other steak I ever had. A, because it was medium rare, and B, because it was dry aged. So it had all that funk. And the first bite I had, I was like, this is not for me. But then I got totally into it. But I remember the moment when I tasted it, it kind of shifting everything in my mind. And the fact that these adults were gracious enough to bring a 20-year-old kid to a dinner for that experience, I will certainly forever be grateful for that. In 2002, I went to Club Macanudo for dinner with Avo and the general manager of Davidoff at the time, David Kitchens. And that first interaction with Avo was certainly one I'll never forget, because obviously as a 22-year-old kid, and Avo was a very generous and gracious guy, but he had a great relationship with David. I didn't have a relationship. And so I was really just kind of there watching. There was a live band playing during dinner, and as drummers do, I wasn't paying attention, but it was a Latin band, and I was playing clave with my hand, listening to the band play. And Avo looks over, a fellow musician, and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I apologize. I thought I was interrupting the meal." And he asked if I was a musician, and I said yes. And it was at that dinner that Avo and I formed what would become a you know, over decades long friendship. And then there's been a handful of meals that have been with chefs, and high profile or not doesn't make a difference, because I've been really lucky. I've been able to eat with Emerald and Zakarian and Charlie Palmer and all these guys. But in the occasions where they have prepared the meal and delivered it, that's a very unique connection. And then they sit and eat with you. That's really something special. I mean, there was one dinner in particular with Zakarian that stands out at Lamb's Club. And there was one dinner with Emerald that stands out, that actually he didn't cook, but it was at Emerald's in New Orleans at Chef's Table after a Emerald Lagasse fundraiser, and he invited me to join his family for dinner after the fundraiser, and it was just like such a crazy moment, sitting in Emerald's with Emerald's family at Emerald's Chef's Table at Emerald's. That was just bonkers. But meals are so important. They're just there's such a unique moment in a day where you just enjoy something that is so simple. I mean, we're fortunate, most of us are blessed to eat every day. And so we tend to take meals for granted, but to be able to eat a meal like that with someone like that in a place like that certainly stands out. But we really could do a whole show. I mean,
yeah,
there was one night in Hawaii, we used to do this food and wine festival throughout the years, and I did it with Emerald a handful of times. And there was one night where we had spent a little too much time in the sun drinking Mai Tais, and by the time we got to dinner, we were both pretty overserved, and the fried rice dish that came out with this particular meal, the rice was not cooked well, and so it was like really hard. And so Emerald was spitting like rockets, like bullets, rice kernels at me during dinner, which is obviously completely inappropriate, but it was also just so funny that I just couldn't hold it together. I was laughing hysterically that this guy was pelting me with rice bullets out of his mouth at dinner, and my wife is yelling at me, and his wife is yelling at him, and it didn't make a difference. That was also very funny. There's a lot of them, man. That we should do a whole show on that.
We should. I'm going to table that for sure. We're going to do this. Please tell me at one point when he pelted you, he said "bam" at least once.
He never says "bam."
Oh.
He hates saying "bam." Absolutely hates it.
It was his tagline once, and like he was like, "Oh shit!" Like he came
Over.
up with it. Yeah.
Unless he's on TV, and then he'll say it. But like the worst, if you see Emerald in an airport, do not ask him to say "bam." You are not going to get a picture. You're not going to get an autograph. Don't do it.
No, if I ever meet Emerald, my first thing is going to say, "Hey, I know Michael Herklots."
There you go. That's the play.
That's the first thing I'm going to say. Hey,
that's the play.
We have a mutual friend. That's exactly what I'm going to say. All right. I'm going to change this. You've done this segment a couple times now, Michael. This is our next segment is brought to you by Asylum Cigars. Refuge is more than just a physical place. It can be a state of mind. Some of life's greatest reflections can be found in our own personal asylum. Moments like these were made for Asylum Cigars. So light an asylum and choose your refuge. Michael, last time I asked you about a specific, I kind of left it a little open-ended. But this time I want to be specific to Ferio Tego, and I'm going to be even more specific to Suma. Talk to us about that moment. You talked about the creative process earlier in tonight's conversation about creating Suma and the creative process that you take and the hands-on and collaborative effort that you partner with these cigar makers, in this case, in Suma's case, Manolo Casada and the folks there at that factory. Walk us through the experience when you smoked it and you knew it was done, it was finished.
Yeah, it's a paralyzing moment because you don't know. Like all you know is that version of it is spot on. And that's after, so I blend in 6x50. So we finally got the 6x50 to where I wanted it. Then we said, okay, these are the 4 sizes we're going to launch with. We made those 4, and they did not taste like the 6x50. So then you have to go vitola by vitola and tweak to get them to be telling the same story. Once we did that, then they have to be smoked in the United States because they taste different.
Right.
So then we shipped them here, and specifically the 6x60 was not the same. So we had to go tweak that. So there's this has been, just tweaking finals has been over a year trying to get it right. Then once you get it right, you know that what you're signing off on is one team's interpretation of this experience that they've perfected and done right. And then how do you translate that to production and trust the fact that they're all going to be good? You can't taste them along the way because it's not apples to apples. They're not aged. They're not, the only way you realize an endemic mistake is when it's too late. So there's so much trust that goes in, but the moment the 6x50 hit was like, okay, this is exactly the cigar that is Suma. Once the sizes hit in their interpretations of the story, when we finally put in the purchase order to say, these are the final formats, these are the final blend tweaks per size, this is the production per format, this is the date we expect it in. It's a great moment, but it is one scary moment because you just don't know how it's going to be. And then when they finally land 16 weeks, 20 weeks later with some age, you go and smoke them. And my reaction is always, it's not right. Like immediately, it's not right. Something's off. It could be better. But when you have other people experience it, not having gone through the tortuous process of tweak by tweak and blend by blend and knowing the generations that came before, but being able to experience it clean and get their initial reactions, for me with Suma, that was a great moment because the feedback was the closest to mine I think I've ever received. Like with Elegancia and Generoso, people loved them, but their experience with them was not necessarily the same as mine. What I found with Suma is that those people who had the experience and shared their feedback with me was straight in line with my experience with it. And so I had a very high degree of confidence that this is going to be a very successful project. And now with the success of its launch and being in market and seeing initial reviews, seeing people enjoy it in Vegas, I'm completely confident that this production is exactly what it should be. And now we'll work on the next production to make sure it's the same.
Awesome. I'm so proud of you, Michael. I hope that doesn't come across as condescending.
Not at all.
The
what a compliment, man. I appreciate it.
I just put it down a few minutes ago. And true to form, fuck your clean palate bullshit, because I've smoked some cigars today. It cut right through those. I was drinking.
I brought a Timeless Prestige Especiales to smoke in the second half of this, and yet I'm still smoking my Suma Torpedo. And it's rare historically that I smoke cigars down this low, but I'm just enjoying the hell out of it.
Yeah, I smoked mine pretty cool. I couldn't believe how fast it was going, and it slowed down in the second half, or maybe I slowed down in the second half. And like I talked to you about that transition in the second third that just completely changed the profile of it. The smoke was still that viscous feel that you were talking about earlier on was still present, but the flavors that I was getting out of it was just so much so different than the first third, but not in a contradictory way. Like I've had cigars that are contradiction. Like like I said, there's complex and there's contradictory, which sucks because it's like, oh, I'm enjoying this cigar, then oh shit, all of a sudden it's like I would like the cigar, but it doesn't seem to go with the first part of it, and it's like shit, like I'm smoking two different things, and it just doesn't work. This worked really well, and it was just a really wonderful experience from beginning to end. Everything that I drank with it, it smoked really well. It was great with the coffee. It was great with the wine, which I'm not a big wine and cigar guy, particularly. I really enjoyed the scotch with it too. It was just a really, really, really fantastic experience. And I think I'm going to stick with my initial assessment when I was toasting the foot, and I continued to take in the aroma as it kind of built and changed and everything. The aroma is probably the most fascinating part of that. You know, you would like to say like, oh, well, God, so you didn't like the flavor? No, I just talked about the flavor being wonderful, but the aroma was so unique and different. Like I said before, it's not something I said, like, it's not something that I haven't had before, but it's so rare that it made it really stand out for me was the aroma. And I've really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed
When
it.
I talk to whiskey makers and winemakers, they obviously want to make something that tastes great, but the greatest compliment you can pay them is when you have the wine in the glass and you just keep smelling it and you just keep smelling it. And the same with whiskey in a glass, because that, again, it speaks to the complexity and the nuance and the subtleties, and that it's more than just the thing in your mouth. There's more to it. And to your point earlier about having the development and change, that's also part of it. I like stories that are complex, that have elements that take you by surprise, but that once it concludes, there's a true resolution to the story. And you know, when you study music, it's the same thing. Like you have chord changes and progressions, and it can be very intense, but at some point it resolves into something that puts you at ease. Um, if there is a way to do that in this, that's what I hope to achieve, is to create those moments and to create complexities and to make you pay attention to more things that maybe you don't in other cigars that you enjoy, but that by the time it's over, you are at peace and it's resolved and it has concluded, that it hasn't necessarily left you wanting more that didn't finish, that somehow there's a question that's not answered. It's fully resolved and you just want to watch the movie again or listen to the song again or smoke another cigar again.
No, I definitely can't wait to smoke another one, which is, Michael, I'm going to be honest with you. We were talking a little bit about the show, you know, being underwhelming in terms of like new releases and stuff. I didn't have, and this isn't, I don't want this to come across as an indictment of the industry, because it's not. I know what Vegas does to cigars. I'm not an idiot. A lot of the cigars I smoked got Vegased quite a bit, you know. So for this cigar to be, you know, we were joking around about it being hot boxed in the UPS storage unit, which it was, truth be told.
Right.
But even for it to rest a couple of days and to have that kind of performance was incredible. For one. Two, I didn't really have a lot of cigars that I enjoyed at the trade show. And again, that's not an indictment of the painstaking hours and labor that went into them. I will certainly smoke them all again because I want to appreciate them in a more authentic environment, so to speak. But that's definitely a standout from the few that I've smoked and stuff. So I mean, like I said, I'm very proud of you. You should be very proud of it. It's incredible, and I can't wait to smoke it again. That'll be a really great return for me.
I appreciate the feedback, and I'm sure the Casadas will be as equally appreciative as I am. I mean, it's a project that I think we're all very proud of. And look, the longer you enjoy cigars, the harder it is to really be moved by one. You know, I mean, the same with wine for me. There are a lot of beautiful wines that I enjoy a lot. So it becomes harder and harder for me to take a sip of wine and be wowed, because I've been wowed so many times. And so you continue to raise that bar. And I don't need to be wowed. I'm fine just being appreciative, tasting something and saying, yeah, that goes in that category of really unique, beautiful, graceful, delicious, well-balanced stuff. But when there is an opportunity to do both and to put something in that category, but to do it in a way that is memorable enough that you want to repeat it, to have it be an experience that you can taste in your memory and then be able to satisfy it by cutting and lighting, that is a big win. And I really hope that's what we've achieved. I hope that's what we achieve with all of our blends. I think we have certainly done that with Elegancia and Generoso, and I'm very confident that we've done that with Suma.
Awesome. So that was our part of our Asylum moment, brought to you by Asylum Cigars. Light up an asylum and choose your refuge. Michael, we've come to that time in the evening. It's our last question of the night. And of course, it is our Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust curveball segment. Fastballs or curveballs, it doesn't matter. Since the company's inception, Steve Saka has been knocking them out of the park 8 consecutive years in the consensus top 3. Congratulations to our good friend, Mr. Steve Saka. Michael, here's a question that I've been wanting to ask, but it needed time to it needed a little bit of time in order to it. And maybe I'm asking it a little early, but I think it's a perfect moment in time with the launch of Suma, and this veering direction of Ferio Tego under the flagship brand of Ferio Tego, to ask this question. In 10 years from now, in 2033, what brand do you want Ferio Tego synonymous with? Do you still want it synonymous with, because a lot of people relate it to Nat Sherman, do you still want it to carry that synonymous torch, or do you want it to be compared to something else?
So you loaded the question a touch. So before I answer the question, I do not believe that Ferio Tego is synonymous with Nat Sherman today, for a handful of reasons.
That's fair.
Number one, Nat Sherman is another family's legacy, and I was very honored and privileged to work for the Sherman family, to create blends for the Sherman family, and to grow their business, work for Altria and Philip Morris too after the acquisition, and continue to grow the brand. But that story concluded in 2020. Period. Book closed. The Metropolitan and Timeless brands are a Ferio Tego story. Period. Full stop. Timeless and Metropolitan are a Ferio Tego story from this point on. And what has been interesting for me and rewarding, really, is to see how many people have discovered Timeless and Metropolitan only since 2021 under the umbrella of Ferio Tego. And the Ferio Tego brand has a very unique and different proposition than the halo under which Timeless and Metropolitan once lived. That is the Ferio Tego legacy. And as we grow Ferio Tego, whether we grow the flagship brand or whether we grow the other brands, Timeless and Metropolitan, or any other brand that we may launch moving forward, being connected to a brand is such a powerful thing. As a consumer, there are brands that I love, not just in the cigar business, but in other businesses, brands that I love, not necessarily products that I love, although usually they coincide, but a brand goes beyond just your experience with the product itself. That's a blind experience. You can smoke this cigar blind, assess it for what it is, and appreciate it for its complexities, nuance, and character. But when you smoke it with this on it, that pulls emotion in a way that the blind cigar alone cannot. And it's my job, or maybe just it's my goal, that over the next however many years that we're fortunate enough to be in business, that when you see this logo and you see cigars that bear that emblem and the words Ferio Tego, that they make you feel something before you light it up. And that when you light it up, you want the band on, because there are cigars that I smoke, and I'll give you three easy examples. And they are the lowest hanging fruit, but they're meaningful to me for maybe different reasons. Fuente Opus X, Padron 1964 Aniversario, and Davidoff. Those were cigars that I aspired to be able to purchase starting in 1998. And I can remember the first Davidoff I ever had was a short Perfecto. The first Padron Aniversario I ever had was the Imperiale, I think it was called. And the first Fuente Opus X I ever had was the Fuente size. I can't necessarily recall the tasting notes from the moment that I enjoyed them, but I do remember the way they made me feel when I cut it, lit it, and fired it up after I had purchased it. And I felt like I got everything and more out of those cigars. It was worth every single penny, not just because of the way it tasted, but because of the way it made me feel in the hour that I spent with it. I want Ferio Tego to be synonymous with whatever the brand equity and proposition of Ferio Tego is going to be. And I hope it's equal to what it is today philosophically. And that is that we are unwavering in our quality, steadfast in our consistency, and always over deliver in value. And that's not to suggest that it's cheap, because I recognize that $22 for one of these, $23 for an Elegancia Generoso is not inexpensive for something that you burn in an hour. But when you do, when you invest $20 for an hour with Ferio Tego, you get way more than $20 worth. And so I feel very good that when you look at the portfolio that is Ferio Tego today, Metropolitans starting at $7 per cigar, up to $23 at our flagship Ferio Tego Generoso and Elegancia. I think we punch way over our weight. I think we offer a unique proposition to consumers and retailers, and I hope that when you see this, it makes you feel better. I hope you appreciate the work. I hope you think about my family and Brendan's family, and know that you are investing in good people who are working hard. Think of the Placencias and the Casadas and the folks at Agroindustrias too, all of which, by the way, are family businesses. And brands should make you feel better. And I think Ferio Tego is a brand that will continue to make more people feel better. Did that answer your question at all?
Absolutely. I'll take a cue from you, Michael. Full stop.
There it is. By the way, I found the quote that I mentioned earlier, and I think this is a good point. Progress should be measured from the point of origin, not proximity to the destination. That's the quote that I used in my message when I was at my high school, and it has resonated with me from the moment I heard it. It's attributed to a guy named Keith J. Cunningham. And when I heard it, I wrote it down, and that has been my North Star for the last 6 months. That I can't set my sights on the answer to your question. That's not my goal with Ferio Tego. My goal as Ferio Tego is to look at where we started when we first shipped in October of 2021, when we had 0 customers, and look at where we are today. We've shipped to almost 1,200 retailers throughout the United States. We've got incredible blends in market in core fashion. We've had limited editions met with great reviews, and we're developing great partnerships and great relationships every single day. That is great progress from our point of origin. I'm super proud of it.
1000%. I love that quote.
It's a good one, right?
It's no, it's fantastic. It really, I don't want to over explain it. I just want it to kind of sit there.
We've lost sight of what progress is as a culture.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is now set by like what we see, and we want to be there. And social media is the worst for that. You see someone that has something and you want that. But just getting it is not progress. You haven't achieved anything. Progress is the steps it took to be able to get the thing that you want. And you have to recognize the work and the time.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, I can't thank you enough for your time this evening. I can't believe how long we've been talking.
Talk about distance from the point of origin.
Right. There we are. I really appreciate our audience. We've had a lively audience this evening. Thank you for staying up late with us. It is much appreciated. This was a fantastic conversation.
I always ask, and as long as we're on, it's worth it. Was there anything in comments from a question standpoint that we should answer?
I don't think some questions, a lot of comments, a lot of praise, okay. Things like that. A lot of agreement on some of the points you made, which was good. Really, like I said, a really lively audience, which was fantastic. That stayed with us for long. They're still up with us too, which is just crazy. It's been pretty consistent the whole night. So thank you so much to everyone who joined us this evening. Thank you so much.
One last thing? My final closed. And I think I've closed this way with you before, but I'm so grateful when people enjoy the work, invest their money, buy our brands, and enjoy them. But if you could take one extra step and amplify your experience in however you amplify experiences, whether you take a photo and post it, whether you share your affection for a particular cigar in the lounge of your choosing, whether you just take a picture of it and show your buddy, you buy one extra and give it to someone, that is a authentic endorsement of the work. And that is worth way more than an advertisement or a review, because it's trusted. It's coming from you. It's coming from someone who someone already has a relationship with. And so it would be a great help to us as a new and growing business. If you love Ferio Tego, please help us amplify our story by amplifying the brand that you love. and just share it with someone, however you do that.
Absolutely. Well, we've been sharing it with a lot of people tonight, and I know that it'll be shared with more in the coming days as we get this out to the podcast world. Be sure to, if you are a subscriber on our podcast, remember you can always download our shows on, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, iHeartRadio, and so on. Be sure you download, subscribe, and review. If you already are a subscriber, do me a favor, hit unsubscribe, but don't forget to hit resubscribe because that actually helps my numbers. And it allows me to get great guests like Michael whenever I want. So that's always nice. You can always check out our live show every Sunday right here on our Facebook page, ELOSOFUMAR. You can check out our YouTube channel by the same name. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well. And you can check out all of our shows leading up to the trade show the last few weeks. They're on there as well. So good stuff, including our 250th take. None other than Michael's great partner, Manolo Casada, which was a fantastic conversation. He got up at 4 a.m. because he was in Spain, believe it or not.
I know.
To do that show. That was unbelievable. I couldn't believe that.
He's the man.
He is. Unbelievable. So thank you to our audience again. Thank you to you, Michael, as well. And we really appreciate it. We'll see everybody next week as we've got a really fantastic guest. I'm really excited about that. That announcement will be coming here in the next couple of days. And without further ado, we'll close out tonight's show. As always, I'm Bear Duplessis, live from the Alec Bradley studio of Azle, Texas. This was our 256th take. He's Michael Herklots. I'm Bear Duplessis. And guess what, everybody? We'll see you next time. I'll say it for Michael. Ferio Tego!
Ferio Tego!